much, and thank you everybody for coming along this evening. The title of this talk was my three lessons I've learned from failure, which is always an interesting topic. I guess they say you learn most from failures. So by that token, I ought to be a genius by now. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the first company I created and span out. So 22 years ago, I moved into the sector. I joined the Carbon Trust. For most of my time at the Carbon Trust, I run something called Carbon Trust Enterprises. And this is the first venture we formed was called Connective Energy. So I'll just talk you through the story of that, and then I'll draw out the final three lessons. Connective Energy, the concept was born of basically, if you can imagine, there's lots and lots of, so two-thirds of the waste heat in the UK goes up the chimney. So we had basically identified there were lots of industrial sites that were basically throwing waste heat up into the air. They were often co-located near sort of other factories that needed low-grade heat. So the basic concept of connective energy was to basically capture the waste heat before it went up the chimney and move it in the form of steam or hot water to a nearby food factory. So typically, take a brickworks, for example, produces an awful lot of waste heat. You co-located or near a food factory, which needs a lot of low-grade heat. And we just basically build a pipeline, and the theory went we'd buy the waste heat and then transport it and then sell it to the food factory. The way that Carbon Trust Enterprises operated, we basically came up with the idea, did the sort of seed funding and the concept, and then went out to find private sector partners. So Connective Energy was a joint venture between Carbon Trust, who had the customers and the carbon knowledge, Doosan Babcock, which is an engineering company, and Triodos Bank, who obviously provided lots of project finance. So we went out, we recruited a team led by a guy who used to be an MD in E.ON, so went out into the marketplace. So after about 12 months, we basically things weren't going quite well. We weren't getting the sales through, and the equity was starting to run out. So I was tasked by my board to say, can you investigate what's going wrong? So I used to be a consultant at Bain, so nothing I like more than the framework. In fact, the only thing I like more than the framework is a 2x2 matrix. So basically, sort of, I went through a framework saying, okay, look at the market, look at the team, and look at the product. So went through to the market and said, we know loads and loads of waste heat is going up into the air. I was on a panel yesterday with Anthony from Satellite View, who basically came up with the same thing. They're using satellites to identify, glass factories located near to users of waste heat. So I was like, that's exactly the same. That waste heat is still being thrown up into the air at the moment. So kind of tick the box on the market side. Went to the team and said, looked at to the MD and said, clearly you seem to be spending much more time preparing for board meetings than going out and actually selling to customers. So our initial reaction was, okay, the team's not working. Let's fire the MD and then bring in and promote the business development director to take his place to really put all the resources on sales. 6 months later, it still weren't getting traction. So then we went to the third one, which we said, and the issue with waste heat is if you're throwing it up the chimney, it doesn't have any value until somebody comes along and says, I'd like to buy that. At which point you go, okay, let me have a look at this maths, and actually it costs, it's going to cost you £19 per megawatt hour to buy this heat off you. The users of waste heat were probably paying £20-25, which didn't give a big enough margin for the actual pipeline and pay the capital cost of the pipeline side of things. So it turned out that actually the business concept was wrong. So by that stage, I think we'd burnt through about 800,000, probably more than that, of sort of startup equity with no confirmed sales. So So I guess just to sort of summarize, I did say I'd do three. So three things. First of all, product market fit. And we use that quite a lot in terms of when we're working with particularly pre-seed companies. If your customer isn't buying, don't blame the customer and be honest with yourself that maybe the product isn't right. You haven't got the price point right, you haven't got the business model right. So the second one is business development. Business development directors are the hardest people in the world to recruit because they're salespeople and they're really good at selling themselves. So take your time, recruiters. Take your time to recruit these people. Find the right people. But if things start going wrong, get rid of them really quickly. I guess I learned quite a lot about making people redundant. It sounds awful, but it's actually quite a good, useful skill and sort of mentality. And then finally, I'd say life goes on. Yes, you've lost money for your investors. Yes, your business has fallen over. But if you have gone the extra mile to try and find and salvage the business as much as possible, you'll learn a whole lot of stuff, but also you do find that stakeholders forgive you. So I bumped into a guy called James Vaccaro, who was the investment director at Triodos, and it was like, oh my God, I apologize, I've lost you 500K's worth of equity. And he said, actually, in some ways, looking back on into the impact you're having on the climate tech sector, actually, probably that was quite a useful training budget for you, which was extremely generous of him. There are probably cheaper ways to do that. So bringing all those things together, I'd say, my overall advice is get back on the horse. Don't be afraid to start new businesses. I say 20 odd years later, we managed to get this place off the ground. We managed to get investment from Barclays Sustainable Impact Capital, and they're really growing and expanding our ecosystem. Hopefully you don't need this. Is audience will know. Climate change is such a critical issue. And the world really needs experienced entrepreneurs. And if you have a failure, then learn from that failure and apply it to your next business. Thank you very much.